this morning. I find it helpful as I travel around the state, and I do travel around a lot, to go to all of my campuses, to stop in at editorial boards and just talk about, where we are as a system, where we're looking to go, what are some of our challenges, and then to just answer any questions you all might have about anything specific. A little background, I've been now in the job for about 1.5 years, and the board has just extended my contract for another 3 years. So in spite of my ability to retire and start getting some of those senior citizen discounts, I've decided to stay on for a while and continue, I think, to make our system a more sustainable system for the future, for the citizens of Connecticut and for the students of Connecticut. We have a lot of budget challenges here in Connecticut, and higher education, public higher education, is not exempt from those challenges. So we have been working very hard with all of the constituencies in the system to come up with a different plan for how the system should look in the future. What is a new model, a sustainable model for the future? All you have to do is pick up any newspaper in any state and see the same challenges. Pennsylvania recently just announced their chancellor is looking at closing institutions and consolidating and merging institutions. As you may know, we have 85,000 students at the 17 institutions in Connecticut that I lead. 92% of those are from Connecticut, and most of those are first-generation college students and come from working families. Not only do they come from working families, but in many cases they are taking care of a family member, either an older family member or a younger family member. They may have children, they may have elderly parents. So they're not your typical go to school for 4 years, live in a dorm, and enjoy 4 years of college like I was able to do back in the dark ages, I call it. But it's a new demographic of a college student, and a demographic that I think will really help Connecticut revitalize its economy in the future. So we have some challenges. We're working through those challenges. We can't do business as usual if we expect the legislature and the governor to view us as a priority. We need to do our part, but it needs to be a partnership. So what I've been talking about is we're going to do our part, and I'll be rolling out in March and April a new plan to my board on how we will look in the future. And I've been asking the governor and the legislature to view us as a partner in that endeavor. Just a couple of baseline numbers. If we were to be flat funded next fiscal year, which is like a pipe dream, okay, with the kind of deficit that people are talking about. And so if we were to be flat funded for next year and assume a 0% tuition increase, we would already be starting out at about $9 to $10 million in deficit. And that's because the majority of our costs in the system are personnel costs and have fringe benefits associated with those employment costs. So as fringe benefit costs rise, even at flat funding, we find ourselves in a hole. The governor's office recently asked us to submit a 10% budget reduction options, like every other function of government. And you may have seen, we're going to close parks, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I chose not to give a plan, but an impact statement on what a 10% budget reduction would mean. If we were to do it all on tuition increases, tuition would rise dramatically, and in some cases 50 to 60% increases in tuition. If we were to do it solely on workforce, our workforce would have to be reduced by about 400 positions. And if we were to do it on state financial aid, which is now known as the Roberta Willis Scholarship Program, we would hardly have anything left to give to students. And, oh, by the way, which was not on that impact statement, but if I was to consider closing campus locations, it would be 2 that the 10% would include. Now, that is not in my thinking right now. I do not want to close campus locations, and we can go into that in a little bit. But I wanted to portray the legislature what this would mean if we were to incur those kinds of debts. And so the same scenario I just talked about with the 0% increase at flat funding, if we got a 10% cut and no tuition increase, it's a $90 million deficit. Now, I can tell you we are going to be offering a new and improved model for how we function, but it's not going to yield $90 million in savings. There's just not that much there. I want to make sure that as we move forward, we figure out what are those services that can be best integrated into one location. A lot of administrative functions that were, I think, originally envisioned to be in one place when the system was consolidated back in 2011, that would free up resources on the campus to really do what I think they're supposed to be doing, which is instruction of students and services for students. One of the issues we have in higher education is retention and graduation. And if you start cutting additional resources from those areas like student services on your campus, you will no longer have the kind of advisors you'll need to help people stay in school. I mean, right now we don't have the number of advisors that we need to be as effective as we need to be. So we're looking at some technology ways of doing that. We're embarking on a new technology system that will allow us to better track students once they're on campus. Are they taking advantage of their meal plan? Are they going to the library? It'll signal to advisors, when they need to meet with the students and when the student appears to be in crisis. So we have a lot of challenges ahead. People ask me why I want to continue to do this. I took on this role because I saw a system that was not where it should have been. I was one of the original architects of the consolidation of the system when I was chief of staff to the governor. And because of, I think, leadership issues and leadership challenges, nobody was able to take the ball and move it down the field to the goal line. And I think we've been able to stabilize the system in the first year and a half. I think I have been able to gain the confidence and the respect of people on the campuses. I love going to the campuses and meeting with the students. It's the most enjoyable part of my job because I get to hear firsthand what are their dreams, what are their goals, and what are the challenges that are in your way for achieving your goals. So I want to leave this system in a very good place, a system that will be sustainable for the long term and that will continue to meet the needs of Connecticut residents. Because as I said, we're educating Connecticut folks from age 13, I think, is our youngest student, to I think our oldest student is like 88 or 92. Non-traditional students, community college, online, and our 4 state universities. And we're also just quite candidly being having some very difficult discussions now about what should our campus climate be. Before the election, I was very involved in a campaign known as I Hear You, which basically said to folks on campuses in a very non-political, non-partisan way, college campuses have a responsibility to be a place where discussion and dialogue takes place. And we need to be able to respect each other's opinion and listen to each other. There's nothing harder in life, and believe me, I know this, than listening to somebody else's opinion when you are diametrically opposed to that opinion. But I think the college campus is the environment where these kinds of dialogues have to happen in a safe environment. And by safe, I don't mean intellectually safe, because I want people to be challenged, but in a physically safe environment. And what we've seen since the election in November dramatically affects our campuses and our students. Our students are very nervous about what the future means for them. We're talking not only about what I view as the most vulnerable population right now, which is our undocumented students, but also our students of color, our gay and lesbian students, our transgender students. We are one of the most diverse systems in America, and it's our diversity that actually makes us strong as a system. And that diversity is being challenged, and I've been very vocal and very strong in my support for all of my students on all of my campuses. As you know, we have 46 students from out of state at Eastern Connecticut State University right now that were part of a Dream.US scholarship program. These were students from what we refer to as locked out states, where they were not able to access in-state tuition in their home states. This private foundation has provided 46 students with a full scholarship to Eastern Connecticut State University for 4 years. I'm happy to report that in spite of all of the discourse around immigration issues and DACA and what this means for students, they all have returned for a second semester. But I have to tell you, they're nervous. They don't know what this is going to mean for them. These are high achieving students. They have 3.8, 3.9, double majors. So we have challenges not only budgetarily but also socially on our campuses, and I think social justice, which is I think the hallmark of our system, is critical if we're going to continue to be who we need to be in the future. And I think continuing to articulate our core values and our core mission is going to be important in the future. And I intend to lead that charge. I'm not shy when it comes to expressing not only what I think is the right thing, but also what I think is the right thing for the system that I lead and for my students.
So in terms of students from elsewhere and maybe international students as well that you have, is there something that the system is doing to help them? I mean, as far as I understand, the issue right now is returning to the United States.
Correct.
Because it's being blocked or scrutinized whether you have a visa or not. So is there something that can be done or that you guys are talking about in terms of like providing housing for them for the summer so that they don't have to go back or leave the country and could stay here and don't have to face some of those?
We are actually, I think, taking a very proactive approach, but also an approach that's based on facts, right? And so right now, there is so much chaos around this issue that really nobody knows what's going to happen, right? You have the executive order which blocks, re-entry into this country. You have a judge who apparently blocked that executive order. You have an administration that apparently is not paying attention. You have I just saw this morning Homeland Security, the head of Homeland Security say, no, we're going to do what the judge said. You have the ACL, you have so much that you don't know really what's going to happen. You don't know what the true story is. So we'll be issuing a statement later today about where we think we need to go short term, and that probably will include cautioning people who might fall into those categories from traveling out of the country. Some common sense measures. We've been in touch ever since the election not only with this Dream.us organization, but with our immigration attorneys who represent different universities around the region. We've had webinars for presidents which tell them what to expect, what not to expect, what we should be saying, what we shouldn't be saying. I don't want to be offering anybody false hope, right? Which is why when the whole sanctuary campus issue came up, I was very cautious in saying, I stand by these students. I'll provide them whatever legal protection I can provide them. I will be out there speaking on their behalf. But if designating an institution as a sanctuary campus has no legal meaning, I want to be honest. Right? I don't want to give people false hope that by designating a campus as a sanctuary campus, or saying that the chapel, for example, is going to be a sanctuary, that's going to protect them. I want to find ways to protect them that we can actually deliver on. And then we're looking at more specific guidance as this week goes on, in terms of what are we going to do with recruiting endeavors of international students and international faculty members. If faculty members are doing research somewhere else, what does that mean? But for right now, we're just going to caution people, I believe, not to travel if you're on the list, whether or not you have a green card or not, until this whole thing is sorted out. And I think, every hour it changes. And so you never know at what point is it going to go to a higher court? Is it going to, is the administration going to choose not to pay attention to the judicial system? Could be. I mean, it looks like that, now. But, I want to make sure that my students know that we're going to be providing them with whatever safeguards we can. I have students coming up to me when I go on campuses in tears. I mean, can you help us? I mean, when I was in the governor's office, I was one of the folks that helped usher in the DREAM Act, which allowed our students to have in-state tuition, among other things. I've been a strong advocate for allowing these students to have access to institutional financial aid, because they pay into that pot of institutional aid when they pay their tuition. So it doesn't seem fair that they can't access that pot of money, but it takes apparently a state law in order to make that happen, because they don't fill out federal financial aid forms, because they're not eligible for any federal financial aid. So I'm on record as being a strong supporter of these students. On the other hand, I have to do what's in the best interest of all my students. And so I take a very proactive approach, but I also like to have all the information in front of me before I make pronouncements or decisions that I can't back up.
Do you have any sense, given Connecticut's record on this issue, that it will be looked at by the administration because of the record of support for the Dreamers and support, and for having so-called sanctuary cities?
Mm-hmm. Do I think that the administration in Washington will?
Yeah. Do you have any sense that they're looking at Connecticut at this point?
I would suspect, if I had a crystal ball, that they're looking at those states, right, that have not only provided, that not only have good records on immigration and immigration reform, but also maybe are led by governors who have been very outspoken on this issue, and also maybe governors who are not so supportive of the administration that is currently, in power. I feel very fortunate, not only having worked for the governor for 4 years, but also knowing him as his friend for longer, that we are led by a governor who is very much in favor of making Connecticut the most welcoming state in the nation. He welcomed in the Syrian refugees, who I met and talked to, and are just like you or I, who just want a better life for their families. So I wouldn't quite honestly put anything past the current administration in terms of looking at those states which have been very vocal. Ever since the executive order went out, you've heard from the mayor of New Haven very strong support for her sanctuary city. The mayor of Hartford, very strong support for his sanctuary city. So I think there's a lot a lot more to come on this, and I think you're going to see the situation, I would think, get a lot worse before it gets better. That's just my sense.
And so just to make clear, you said that the Connecticut State University system was going to issue a statement today, so you expect to issue a statement regarding this and what your hope is?
Yeah, I think the statement today will be more of a reassurance that we are looking at this very closely, that we have the legal experts as resources with some general guidance that I think is more common sense, but I think it needs to be articulated from a system leader. And then I think we're carefully examining what other things we need to articulate in a more, I think, detailed advice sometime later this week, which will answer some very specific questions that have been asked last night and today by union leaders, by faculty senate people. So we're looking at all of those today, but I think my statement today will be, we're on top of this. You should take a deep breath. I understand the concern. Here's the executive order. If you think you might be affected by the executive order, I'd stay in the country. I wouldn't leave the country. And we'll be working with all 17 presidents in the next couple of days to come up with more specific guidance. The guidance that I've seen so far from institutions have been more general in nature, only because people are still trying to understand what the implications are of the executive order, and are people who are here legally and have a green card, are they going to be able to travel? I mean, there seems to even be disagreement within the administration on that. And so until you know, it's really hard to issue specific guidance.
Well, the head of Homeland Security posted a statement on their website last night that addressed green cards, and it was unclear to me exactly what he meant by that, because it seemed to be indicating that people with green cards will be able to enter the country, but that didn't seem to be what was happening at a couple of the airports.
Correct.
So it was...
And it didn't seem to see what the president was saying either.
Exactly. So it was quite confusing throughout the weekend.
Right. So I think it's going to affect all of our institutions here in Connecticut.
Let me just ask you, do you know at any given institution who's documented and who's
So
not
I
documented?
was just going to add, just quickly, so let me give you Southern as an example. They don't have a large cohort of international students. The majority of the students are from the state of Connecticut, upwards of 90%. What they're still trying to gauge in other institutions as well is, are there any professors, are there any faculty that are impacted? Because among academic institutions, you have scholars and professors who could be visiting, could be traveling. So I think the system is still trying to gauge who is going to be impacted, and we're trying to provide them a resource for information. So if you are going to be impacted, or if you don't know whether you are going to be impacted, go here. Here's where you can ask questions. Because we, as Mark said, we really don't know. There's more questions than answers at this point. But we also have to tailor the message to the demographic of our schools. And the majority of our students are from Connecticut.
Well, yeah, so let's just use an example. If I live in Connecticut, say I live in New Haven, and I go over to Southern and I qualify to sign up for classes there, or Gateway, does anybody even ask me what my status is?
No.
I didn't think so.
So you can self-disclose.
Yeah, okay,
And then you can be part of the DACA program. but many people have opted not to do that. So we don't know who is here under what circumstances. And we also are governed by a federal privacy law, which prevents us from releasing specific student information. Similar to HIPAA, on the healthcare side, we have something called FERPA, right, which you probably know what it stands for better than I do.
Family and Education Planning.
Thank you. But it doesn't allow us to release that kind of information. So we're going to be trying to answer all of the questions that need to be answered, but we're also going to be leading, I think, not only by example, but by very strong statements. I've been very strong on this issue since day one, and I will continue to be strong on this issue as well.
What are some of the specific concerns that you've heard?
Well, for example, for folks that, at our universities, professors go abroad to do research. What's going to happen with that? What about recruiting of international students? Right? There's now a bigger emphasis at our universities to recruit international students because they pay out-of-state tuition. And so, as we're looking at revenue sources, this is a revenue source, right? And it also adds to the diversity of the campus. What are we going to do with faculty members who are from out of the country, or if we're recruiting faculty members under specific grants, for example, what's going to happen with those? So we've been hearing those kinds of specific questions, and it deals more with faculty and administrators at this point than it does for students, because I think, as Maribel indicated, most of our students are from the country, who are undocumented. But I'm sure in the time that I've been on the road this morning, there's been many more emails from folks asking some more specific questions. So we have a team that we started working with over the weekend, led by my chief of staff, who put a little SWAT team together today with our human resources folks, with our academic affairs folks, with our legal counsel, to kind of craft answers to the questions. But I think the first thing to do today is to put out a general message that we are working very diligently and expeditiously
Well, out of fear that we'll continue just to talk about violence, is there something specific you can tell us?
plan that all the same things in all the same places in the same region? Do we to an institution. So for example, one of the right? I mean, it's not want to get a degree in criminal justice, which is usually by rail or by bus or by walking. Students to come into Connecticut increase
In those students.
in those students from Mass. We've seen 120. Get a better revenue stream in. So we have to look at quality, we have to look at access, but we also have to be smart because we're competing with private, for-profit institutions. We're competing with other, regional comprehensives, in New England. So, we have to be competitive.
No, I just have to tell you, when I was in Ireland last summer, I met a woman who had just left her term in, I think it was the equivalent of our General Assembly in Ireland. I don't think it was the equivalent of Congress, but she was a former senator. And, I tend to be talkative, or, and interested in people, so we got to talking. And when she found out I was from Connecticut, she told me that she went to Western Connecticut State University, and she actually commuted from New York State, one county over at that time, to Western. I think she was getting a graduate degree. But interesting that you brought up that point, and I actually met somebody in a different country who did that very same thing.
Right.
And she loved Connecticut, actually.
But so we get back to my priority is to make sure that colleges be access are not every single campus continuing to have every single administrative function. Do you know that there's not a single point of purchasing in the system? That all 17 institutions do their own purchasing? I was stunned to find that out. So now we have put together a process where I think within a year, we're going to have a single point of purchasing, which is not meant to get rid of people doing their jobs, but taking advantage of bulk purchasing and leveraging our size as a consumer. You know, maybe one of the options will be for us to bid out as one system all of our food services. Right now, everybody does it separately. It usually gets the same company. Okay? Every campus has a multitude of human resources folks. I'm looking at changing that so that we have some maybe centers of expertise around it, and more things are done virtual as opposed to face-to-face. Financial aid processing. Right now, I'm not convinced that all the financial aid applications that are submitted to institutions get processed. I mean, some have a high conversion because there's not enough people. Some have a high conversion rate and some don't. And when you have, for example, 1 or 1.5 people on your campus in the financial aid office, right, shouldn't those people be dedicated to sitting with students and advising the students on what their options are and helping them navigate the plan and not sitting there processing things? And so I'm looking at what services we can integrate into, a system is supposed to be there to be helpful to the component parts, not to just take power. I'm not looking to take power. What I'm looking to do is to provide the campuses with the resources that they need to meet the needs of the students. And I don't think, purchasing pens at 17 locations makes a lot of sense. I mean, call me crazy, but I don't think it makes a lot of sense.
So we're looking to perhaps streamline HR services and purchasing services and expand financial aid office services.
Or maybe bring in-house, right, the processing, right? So the actual processing could be done quicker, I think, at a central location. But then to have the services of the financial aid people more available to meet the needs of the students. So, and this has been done, just so you know, because my mother didn't raise a fool. I know that higher education, one of the things I had to learn about higher education was that it's very process driven, right? Everything is a process. And coming from a governor's office where the process is like, okay, we have 2 minutes to do this and 5 minutes to do that, and there's a blizzard coming down right? We had to do things very, very fast. So they had to adapt to my style, which is we need to move a little quicker here, folks. And I needed to respect the process of higher education. So we put together 6 work groups, which we started over the summer. People told me I wouldn't be able to get people to participate over the summer. And I said, well, I can't afford 3 months of not doing anything. And so we got faculty and staff and presidents and students together around 6 functional areas. They've just come up with their preliminary recommendations. It's HR, financial aid, human resources, purchasing, compliance, and marketing, because we don't do a good enough job about marketing our institutions or our system. And through a collaborative process, they came up with recommendations, which now will go out tomorrow to the campus community for a quick turnaround of comment to be presented to the board in March. And some of those recommendations will be around streamlining and integrating those services.
Great. Having come from the governor's office, in this discussion, you referred to him as a friend. How is that now being a collaborator, looking at perhaps, 10% cuts? How has that relationship changed in any way?
Well, the relationship is a relationship of having a very close friend.
Sure.
You can't serve as a chief of staff to a governor for 4 years. And if you remember, the year before that, I was the deputy budget secretary, and I was the one that negotiated the CBAC agreement with labor in 2011. So you can't go through everything we went through, tough legislative sessions, blizzards, hurricanes, and Sandy Hook. You can't be that closely tied to a leader without developing a very close bond. So we remain very, very good friends. Periodically, he will ask me, some questions ask me for a little political advice off the record, because I don't give political advice anymore. I'm a kind of a nonpartisan person. Keep my political feelings to myself. But we have a friendship. So my husband and I will go out with the governor and the first lady. We'll go over there for dinner. We'll go and we talk about our kids, and we travel together. And so we have that kind of a relationship. I do not use my relationship with him to try to get favors in terms of budget situations. I would never go to the governor and say, you have to only cut me 3%. That's not fair to him. It's not fair to the relationship. Do I have access to him and to the budget secretary because of my former role? Absolutely. I can go see Ben Barnes anytime I want to see Ben Barnes and talk to him about what the challenges are and talk to him about how I might see, a way around what he needs to do, right? I feel that I'm still part of the bigger Connecticut team, but I have a very specific role now. My role is to advocate on behalf of my system and on behalf of my students. But if I want to express an opinion or give him a float an idea around the governor, I can. And so I probably have better access than most, but I don't abuse that access because the friendship is far more important to me. The personal relationship I have is far more important than another $1 million might get me down the road. I took the position with him. I took a pay cut, by the way, to be the governor's chief of staff. I'll never forget, this is just a funny anecdote. Going home, and the governor had offered me the position, and of course, when he offers you a position, you can't say, can I get back to you in a week? If any governor offers you a position, you better be ready to say yes or no. And I definitely had wanted this position, and I remember going home. And I said to my husband, well, the governor offered me the position, and I took it. And he was like, oh, that's great. So you probably have a bigger office, and you probably got more money. I said, actually, no. The sad news is my office is smaller, and I took a pay cut. And he looked at me like I had 3 heads. Like, what are you doing? But you do things for a reason, and I wanted to serve. I believed in this governor. I've been in public service my whole, adult life since I took my first position. So I wanted to continue to serve Connecticut, and I thought this was the role to do it. But But the relationship I have with him is strong.
I also wanted to clarify, harkening back to something earlier, you want the community colleges to offer both 2-year associate's degrees and 4-year bachelor degrees?
What we're looking at doing, and there's a pilot now that is going on between Gateway and Southern, is for there to be this collaboration where the last 2 years, where the program actually at Southern would go to Gateway. So you
We're
wouldn't
talking about
have
the site.
correct.
So it's like a Southern degree offered
Correct.
at Gateway.
Correct. Absolutely
But
correct.
would it be, the Southern staff would travel to Gateway?
Correct.
Right,
Correct.
so.
And the other thing that's really unique about this program is, so you apply to Southern and you're not ready. So they will say, you're automatically accepted into Gateway, but you're going to be kind of dual enrolled at both places. And we're going to assign an advisor from Southern to also be your advisor while you're at Gateway. So it helps the student make that seamless transition, so they feel like, well, I couldn't quite get into Southern, but I'm still really part of the Southern community. So I think in certain subject areas, we could in fact do that. But that is a pilot that we're just now starting to roll out and to model. But I think I'd like to see it done tomorrow everywhere. But
Well,
we need to.
for example, you named Housatonic. And Housatonic, if you do 2 years, and then need to go someplace else, and that's a vast distance if you don't have a car, and that's true for a lot of people. Getting to New Haven or getting to Danbury would seem like, a vast difference.
Correct.
And
Correct.
could pull people out of
Correct.
that.
The other thing that we're looking to do, and we'll be, hopefully announcing something soon, is a system-wide initiative around transportation. Right, because I want to make it, one of the challenges that I've heard over my first year and a half has been childcare and transportation. And so I want to make it easier, and I've been working with the Commissioner of DOT, and we'll be rolling something out in hopefully the next month or so. A program that makes it a lot less expensive for students to travel by bus or by rail. I mean, a lot of the students that go from Norwalk, say, down to Southern, take the train. And the train right now is very, very expensive. So we're not only looking at getting people, to places a lot cheaper, but taking some of that revenue and working with DOT to expand the routes that are available to the students that meet class schedules. There's some rural communities, for example, Northwestern Community College in Quinebaug Valley. A horse and buggy might be quicker. And no, seriously, they have like one bus that comes every couple of hours.
Well, I don't think you're getting from Heartland to Winstead to get to school on a bus.
Well, they have there's like one bus, so we want to be able to expand those kinds of, opportunities, because if we don't have the transportation that's, affordable and accessible, then I think we're gonna not serve the students well. I mean, right now there's individual institutions that have one-offs with bus companies and stuff, but we're a system. We should be able to leverage the resources we have as a system to make it easier for our students to get to and from school and to work.
Well, I'm going to wrap us up there.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We appreciate your time, and
I'll come back whenever you want me.
Yes, that was really interesting, and I do think that this is a very important issue to people in Connecticut, as you noted. So,
And we'll probably, want to have more conversations as we roll out our,
absolutely.
As I remodel the system, I like to talk about